For almost 1,000 years, the island of Japan was embroiled in war. Even during relatively peaceful periods in this history, armed rebellions and personal duels occurred with regularity. Generations of military warlords and strategists, the samurai, vied for power and survival. This constant warfare led to an intense study of weapons, strategy, and the human that employed them, unlike that of any other time or place in history. Transmitting these hard-won lessons became the focus of varying schools of military arts, a small number of which have been passed down from teacher to student until modern times. In the 1980s, a Western student of Japanese strategy and headmaster of 2 schools of traditional Japanese martial arts, Fredrick Lovret, wrote a seminal treatise on the subject titled The Way and the Power. First published in 1987, the book has been in continuous publication for over 3 decades. In 2020, The Way and the Power was released in a 2nd edition. The foreword was written by a longtime student of Mr. Lovret, Mr. Joseph Sims, who was also instrumental in the edition's release.
All right, gentlemen, you are live.
Tell me a little bit about Fredrick Lovret. Who was he, and what was your relationship to him?
So Mr. Lovret was the headmaster of 2 traditional schools of Japanese martial arts. He was a very unique individual. At a young age, he left home and he joined the U.S. Navy, and he served honorably for 15 years. And then after he retired from the Navy, he focused the rest of his existence on the pursuit and the perpetuation of these martial traditions. It's a very unique thing for a human to do. Most of us have various components to our life. We have our work life, we have our home life, we have our family life. He had one life, and that was serving as the headmaster of these traditions. And he was a student until the day he died. I was a student of Mr. Lovret's. I originally met him in 1993 at an event that he taught. And I was immediately sort of captured by the focus and the intensity with which he presented himself. And I was very curious about, is it possible, really, for somebody to live their life with that level of intensity? And a few years later, I had the opportunity to go and train with him. We had a dojo in the mountains in Colorado, and I spent some time there training. And I only had one question when I went. Does he live his entire sort of life every day, day after day, with that same level of intensity and focus? And after spending quite some time training with him, he absolutely did. He was a very, very unique individual. In fact, I would say he was the most intense and focused human being I've ever met.
For someone who reads The Way and the Power, what is something they should know about the author?
That's a great question. And there are many facets to his life that are important to know. But I would say this is probably the most important. He said what he meant, and he did what he said. So the things that you might read about in that book, they were his life pursuit. There was no gap between who he was and what he said. No gap.
Tell us a little bit about The Way and the Power.
So The Way and the Power was really his seminal work. He was quite a prolific author. He wrote several books. He also had a magazine for a period of time and an online magazine. But this was really his major work. It has been in publication continuously now for over 33 years. It is interesting that he wrote this book relatively young in his life, yet the wisdom contained within it is quite profound. The Way and Power is really two treatises bound together by an introduction. The second treatise is on strategy, where the first treatise is really on the components of, or mechanisms of, or perhaps even a methodology of what it takes to step forward into the unknown and win.
So the value of studying strategy for professional military personnel is obvious. What is the value of studying strategy for your average reader?
So while learning strategy itself has value, perhaps of greater value is learning to think strategically. And strategic thinking is something that is applicable to everyone. And let me give you a good business case for this. Today, we see this concept of big data, and people are very excited about its potential. But essentially, big data uses strategic thinking. It uses a methodology of thinking that is unbiased, and that is its value, to be able to look at information and be able to assess it in a clear-eyed, unbiased way. If you think back to actually being in an engagement where your very life is at stake, this ability not to attach bias to thought, but to see things as they are and then be able to use that information to win, that's a powerful concept.
We've discussed part 2 of the book, which deals with strategy. Tell me about part 1.
The first part of the book, for lack of a more common vernacular, is a methodology or perhaps the components of what it takes to step forward into the unknown and enact that strategy, to step forward in the unknown and win. The Japanese, because of how long they were engaged in continuous warfare and the study of the science of war, which ultimately was elevated to an art form, gave them a window into the human condition. And what they did is they were able to identify these naturally occurring conditions of existence, to label them, and then to teach a methodology to be able to obtain them and apply them in life. These components of existence, these states of, these mental attitudes are the very thing it takes to win. They are things like confidence. They are things like how somebody views that confidence. Powerful, powerful learning tools, not only for adults, but for children. Sometimes I think it's fascinating what we focus on when we focus on teaching our children. We tend to focus on things like learn math, learn science, learn how to play this game, when really the things that make people successful in life are a level up from that. Not to learn a thing, but to learn how to learn. Not to learn how to do something, but to learn how to be good at all things. What are those foundational principles? What are those foundational things that allow you to be successful in life?